Dallas Cowboys rookie tight end Luke Schoonmaker could be the opening day starter at tight end. All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. And joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, today we are reviewing some more notes from OTA practices for the Dallas Cowboys. But how was your Memorial Day weekend?
It was good. It was nice to get the little extended day off. And this is always an interesting time, in the football calendar because it kind of marks the beginning of the beginning, right?
Yes.
Like the
it's the start of summer,
camp.
right?
That's right. The OTAs, the stuff that they start having to do early on before they take kind of an extended break and then come back for the beginning of training camp. So it's a good time to kind of get the very early glimpses of what, directions certain things may be headed. Or just kind of peek through the keyhole a little bit. So I'm excited to do that.
Yeah, so we've got some notes that I want to review from Mickey Spagnola over at DallasCowboys.com. The first one is Cowboys rookie tight end Luke Schoonmaker lining up with the first team. He was the first tight end in line in a lot of the drills. When Cowboys were doing some of their 7-on-7 and the team stuff, he was the tight end on the field. And I think that's noteworthy considering Jake Ferguson and Peyton Hendershot were both present at practice. They were doing stuff. What are your thoughts on Schoonmaker kind of already getting starting reps for this team?
I mean, I don't think I'm terribly shocked. I mean, I think that there has been a lot of talk about, Ferguson just being handed this job and kind of, Schoonmaker getting in wherever he can fit in, But I mean, Schoonmaker was a second-round pick, and pedigree matters. And I think that they're going to give him every opportunity to get a ton of playing time, and whether that's as the second tight end in a whole bunch of 12 personnel or rotating as the starter as the one tight end when there's only one tight end in the field. I do think that he's going to get a healthy dose of snaps and a full opportunity to kind of be the first tight end off on the field when they deploy them. So I do think that we're going to see them kind of accelerate Schoonmaker's at least learning process so that there can be a competition. And that's the other thing to remember here is that they need to get these guys a certain amount of install to even facilitate a competition in training camp, right? Like they have to have their rookies at least similar kind of knowledge base of the offense so that they can compete when it's time to compete. So I think that's what we were seeing here with Schoonmaker is that they're getting him ready to be in the competition for snaps at the start as a starting tight end.
You mentioned the pedigree. Another reason why the pedigree matters is the Cowboys felt like we need to spend a second-round pick on Schoonmaker, even after what we saw from Jake Ferguson and Peyton Hendershot as rookies. It would be different if you drafted Schoonmaker in the second round, and then you turned around and you drafted Jake Ferguson in the fourth round in the same draft. No, it's pretty clearly like the Cowboys thought we need an upgrade. We're going to spend a top 60 pick on this position. Let's get this guy going. And then on top of that, because he's already an older prospect, he turns 25 during his rookie year, maybe they feel like we can't really sit around and wait for him to develop. Like he needs to start playing now. And maybe they feel like he already is developed. And that's why there was an appeal to drafting him in the second round is, hey, he can be ready to go and be our starting tight end from day one.
Yeah, part of the appeal of going to get one of these kind of, Stanford through Michigan, the hardball tight ends, right, is that they come in pretty well developed, and so that they can hit the ground running. And look, I think the other thing to kind of remember here is think about what has walked out that door with Dalton Schultz. It's a lot of production, a lot of snaps, doing a lot of different stuff. So even if there wasn't a pedigree issue here, you would have to imagine that Ferguson is not just stepping right into Dalton Schultz's production, right away and is ready to go. So you need all the help you can get. You're going to have to kind of cobble together that production with a couple of different guys, including Hendershot, including Schoonmaker, and obviously including Ferguson. So I think that we kind of get myopic about, tight end one and about, position. I think the truth of the matter is that there's a lot of production that they're going to have to replace. And to ask someone, even Jake Ferguson, who had a good year last year, but asking Jake Ferguson to come in and produce that all by himself, that's a tall order. So drafting a high-ranked guy to kind of come in so that you can pair them together and hopefully, find a way to kind of triangulate that production between the three of the tight ends that you do have in the room. I think that's smart football, and that's the best way to make sure that you are replacing what has walked out of the door with Schultz.
I will say this. There's just no chance that one of these guys is going to be on the field for like 95% of snaps. Like this is going to be a tight end rotation, right?
Yeah, tight end by committee. It's I think they'll play a lot of 12 personnel and 13 because they like these guys, and you'll see them on the field at the same time. But even when they don't, even when it's just one tight end, I imagine that it's not necessarily going to be only Ferguson or only Schoonmaker, unless one of them really, really breaks out and becomes kind of in that upper tier of tight ends, which is certainly possible. These guys are young.
They would love that. Like that would be an awesome
Yeah.
problem to have, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's the hope is that, maybe the light really turns on for Ferguson and he really takes a huge step this year. That'd be fantastic if that happened. If it doesn't, you've got Schoonmaker, you've got Hendershot to kind of, like I said, not to take the place of, not in lieu of, but in support of Ferguson, to kind of make sure that you get all that production that you need from the position.
I've got two more questions on this tight end position. Number one, who do you think the Cowboys want to win this job? Like in an ideal world, if they could say, hey, one of these guys is going to break out and become, our every down tight end. Do you think it is Schoonmaker?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think that it's tough because clearly they like Schoonmaker a lot, just based solely on where they drafted him, right? I think that I think that they would like to have two solid tight ends that they could rotate.
I almost think they would rather have that than having just one guy separate themselves from the pack, right?
Yeah, and I think because look, I mean, despite what them looking very similar and Cowboys clearly having a body type with tight ends, they're very different type players, right? Like Ferguson's more of a yak guy and get the ball in his hands to see what he can do. Schoonmaker is more of kind of a big target that you can move around a little bit, and he can you can get him open and like crossing routes and stuff like that. So and more of maybe like a kind of a seam runner, So. I think that they are kind of different tight ends, and if you don't have a Kelsey or one of those top guys that can kind of do everything, though even Kelsey doesn't do everything.
No, he really only does one thing.
Yeah, he's just a receiver. So I think that there is something to the idea that maybe you find a guy who could be your dominant tight end, but you're still going to end up playing these other guys. I mean, dominant receiving tight end, but you're still going to end up playing the rest of these guys no matter what, because just for their differing skill sets.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably a bad example, but I remember like the Ravens in like the 2012-ish time. They had Dennis Pitta and was it there's a Dickerson, Ed Dickerson or something like that. Yeah, but they would have two tight ends that weren't individually awesome, but together it was a really nice combo, and it made their offense really hard to stop. So I kind of think the Cowboys are going to look to do something similar. The other question I had for you, if you had to bet on one of these tight ends to play the most snaps, I don't really care about the starter part because a lot of that's just based on seniority or whatever, but who ends up playing the most snaps at the tight end position this year for Dallas?
I think Ferguson, just because, the combination of him being, the kind of, I mean, he's the kind of veteran of this group, even if he may not be any older than Hendershot, right?
Well, I think Schoonmaker's the oldest, though, right?
Yeah, that's true. I think, Ferguson is the guy that has probably got the most, obviously NFL experience at this point. So I imagine that he will kind of come out as the front runner, up front. But we'll see. I'm going Luke. Schoonmaker hits. What'd you say?
I'm going to pick Luke to do it because I kind of think he's the best blocker already of the three. Right. And if you're going to be on the field to block, you're probably going to play a lot of snaps, and maybe they'll rotate Ferguson and Hendershot in, but we'll see. Tight end room is one of the, I mean, in terms of like question marks, I think that's the biggest one we have for the Cowboys kind of going into the season, just because the top tight end on this team had like 189 receiving yards last year.
Well, And the other thing too is that you drafted a guy who, even though these guys are all the same, similarly sized, the guy you drafted has a little bit higher pedigree, has a little bit more height, has a little bit more speed. So it feels like Schoonmaker maybe is just a half tier more of an athlete, more of a pedigree than the rest of these guys. But he's going to have to work into it, and tight end is a position that you usually kind of have to work into.
All right, Lane, let's talk about another rookie who saw time with the first team during OTAs next. This episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Are you looking for a delicious snack but don't want all of the sugar and the calories? Then you need to try the best tasting protein bar ever. It's Built Bar. You've absolutely got to try this. They taste amazing, but they're healthy. I can't even explain how great they are. What makes Built Bar so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real dark chocolate. That's right, real dark chocolate. And they come in so many unbelievably great flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. I'm not sure how Built does it because these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. Only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, but a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't even have to wait to get a box. For years, we've been telling you to go to built.com to order your specialty bars, which you can still do, by the way. But now you can run into your local Walmart, go to the pharmacy section and pick up a 4-bar box of the cookies and cream, the double chocolate bar, or the coconut puff. Or if you live near a Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with some of the hit flavors, including brownie batter puff and churro puff, and you can thank us later. All right, we want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen of the day. Every dayers, tomorrow on the show, we're going to be answering your Twitter questions, so make sure you send them in to me at Marcus_Mosher. All right, Landon, our next note comes from Mickey Spagnola. Again, he says that Eric Scott, a cornerback that the Cowboys drafted late on day 3, was taking reps with the first-team defense opposite of Stephon Gilmore. Now, we need to clarify some stuff here. No Trayvon Diggs at practice. He was in the building, didn't practice. They had Kelvin Joseph playing in the slot, but it was ahead of Deron Bland. Is that interesting to you?
They're trading Trayvon Diggs and Eric Scott as your new starter at corner.
Breaking
news, guys. No, I think it's again, we kind of talked about this last week a little bit too, right? And maybe a little bit yesterday on the show, where I think depth chart is really tough to kind of parse right now, right?
Don't overreact to anything right now.
Yeah, they're giving all these guys opportunities to kind of do different things, to work in different groups, to kind of just try things out. This is not they're not in competition mode yet. They're in learning mode. So I think what it shows you is that they're very serious about getting Eric Scott ready to play some defensive snaps, or see if he can play some defensive snaps. As soon as this year. I think that they know what they like in the guy as a special teamer. I think they like the idea of potentially, having him as a game day active guy, because they potentially would like him to play, a variety of special teams. But I think that this is the point where they have to kind of teach him and see if he's ever going to be able to give you anything as a defender. If a couple guys get hurt and go down, you need to plug him in. So that's why you're seeing a lot of this stuff. That's why you're seeing a lot of the kind of Kelvin Joseph, and just to kind of circle back on that note that we had, it does sound like Kelvin Joseph was doing some kind of free safety stuff. So I think they are actually trying to kind of see what kind of roles these guys can play. Some of the, mostly if you're paying attention to the down roster defensive backs, right, and other folks, and not even just defensive backs. You see the same thing with Isaiah Land and some of these other guys. They're seeing the versatility that can be applied to these down roster game day guys, so that they can see how well they can fit them into their game day rosters. And if you'll notice, it's Kelvin Joseph, it's Scott, it's Land, it's guys who they have plans for on special teams, right? They're seeing what they can do on defense.
Really quickly on Kelvin Joseph, I just wouldn't react to the safety stuff too much, because we've seen Jordan Lewis take safety snaps and OTAs. It's clear they want him to try to be a slot guy, but if he needs to be
stuff against the wall right now,
exactly, it's 100% what it is. And back to Eric Scott, I think they just need to find out, Nahshon Wright and Eric Scott, who is the better outside cornerback? Because if they're comparable on special teams, we're going to go with a guy that can at least give us something on defense. So they're probably just trying to figure out things. I would be shocked, absolutely shocked, if Eric Scott was one of your top 4 cornerbacks this year.
Yeah.
I mean, that's that. Even then, like if I were to say top 5 cornerbacks, that would be maybe a little bit of a stretch. So this is one where I know he was getting starting snaps against Michael Gallup, but please don't overreact to this one.
Yeah, they're just seeing what these guys can do. Like this is all just exploratory. This is not, all right, he's earned his spot. Let's see if he can go out there and keep it. It's more just they're teaching these guys how to run inside the defense. They're learning the calls. They're doing all. Sometimes it's easier to learn like how to run these calls and identify offenses and stuff when you're in a defensive backfield filled with vets. They know what they're doing. They know how to make the calls. And sometimes lining up with those guys can just show you the standard, Exactly. And so I think that's what's going on here. They're getting these guys reps with the ones to kind of give them experience, not necessarily to see if this guy can be a starting corner, but more just to help him learn so that when it comes competition time, he's not having to think about it as well.
All right, let's get to some other notes. This one, again, from Mickey. He says that it was good to see Matt Waletzko back on the field practicing after undergoing shoulder surgery last season, landing in on injured reserve for the final 11 games. Remember, he's 6'7", 320 pounds, and working exclusively at left tackle.
Yeah, so actually, the Cowboys site had some video of practice a little bit, just to kind of like with the blitz or whatever in the background of some of their shows. Waletzko looks good, man. Like he is big. Massive. He's so big, and obviously 6'7", 320 says it, but right. But I think that you see like the kind of the draw here for a guy that big, that long, that athletic. He looked like he was moving well. It's a long way that he's coming, and he's coming from after a shoulder injury, and there's a lot that he's going to have to work to overcome, just based on where he started and where he's trying to get to. But I think that if you can get Waletzko into a spot where his technique is clean enough that he's, not getting you killed, this is a guy that you'd love to continue to develop. I mean, he just has such great tool set. And this isn't like a Josh Ball situation where, you tried him out in a couple different spots. You're not exactly sure what you're going to get with this guy. Well, let's go. It's a pretty clear path. Like he needs to get stronger, and he needs to kind of get some experience, but you're very clear on what his path is. He's going to be a tackle. And if he can figure out, the kind of nuance of the game and get a little bit more core strength, and you wonder how much of that he was able to do with the shoulder surgery in the offseason. But if he was able to kind of get some of his core strength up and kind of just understand the nuance of the position he's playing a little bit more, I think there's a lot of upside there. Well, and potentially he could come in as your swing tackle. I think is your best hope for what he could be this year.
I even wonder though, like, would he even be a swing tackle? What I mean is, like, if he's going to play, is it going to be at left tackle exclusively? Maybe that's the best way. Maybe that's the best way for success here is don't overwhelm him trying to learn the footwork and the technique for 2 different spots. Let him just focus on left tackle, because if he hits and he is a left tackle, you've hit a home run. And if it doesn't work out and he can't play left tackle, then whatever, you move on. It's a 5th round pick. It's not a big deal. But I kind of would rather just see him have like multiple years figuring out one position. And then if he does figure that out, maybe down the road, you can try moving him around. But I want to see what he looks like after a full off season of just learning one spot.
Yeah. Of all these guys that they have in this room, it feels like, well, let's go and maybe, some of the kid from Kansas that they just signed, that they
Bostic.
feel like, where they're a ball of clay. It's like they need to kind of continue to work traits for these guys, as they don't have necessarily a ton of experience that you're satisfied with, or you feel like you need to, you can just deploy out in the field. So if you can get either one of those guys to kind of hit at that position, and that's why you draft or sign undrafted free agents like that down rosters, because the upside is huge.
All right, we've got one more note on a second-year player that could be in for a bigger role in 2023. Let's get to that one next. All right, Landon, our last note from OTA practice. This is, again, from Mickey Spagnola. He says, keep an eye on second-year running back Malik Davis. The kid flashes an undrafted rookie, averaging 4.2 yards per carry. The coaches were doing some short yardage and goal line stuff last night, and he just jumps off the tape. It's not about replacing Zeke. It's about opportunities for the young guys. That was Mike McCarthy talking about some of the film study they were doing on Malik Davis. So do you buy that Malik Davis is going to be the first guy up to replace Zeke's goal line production?
I mean, I can see it. I think that you saw some positive stuff from him last year, and he he averaged over 4 yards a carry on what was it, 35 plus
Yeah.
carries. So he showed you a little something, and I think they really liked him beforehand as well. He's probably 210-ish. He's not Zeke sized, but I think as far as what you've got in the room currently, outside of Lipke, he's probably the most hammerish of those guys, right?
Yeah.
And I think that so there is some thought. I can understand the thought there. The thing that's interesting about that is that I like Malik, and I think he should definitely get a shot, kind of as in a role of some sort in this running back room. But I mean, I don't specifically think of him as like a hammer between the tackles. I mean,
Like,
I
I
think
don't
he's
think
more of
that-
a balanced running back.
Yeah,
right?
I think he's just a more balanced, do everything running back, right? But
Yeah. So
if
it's
you're going to take Tony Pollard off the field, I do think Davis makes some sense as that other running
sure.
back on the roster.
Yeah, I just think that the role of goal line back or short yardage back seems just kind of arbitrary because it's
Well,
not
like you're saying, goal line running back only, right?
yeah, or I mean, honestly, I don't know, putting him in versus Pollard is like so much of an improvement in size and
No.
power, right? Like
Well, Pollard's
it's
bigger.
yeah. I mean, there's that, right? Like I will say that there has been issues at times with Pollard. Pollard can tend to lose yardage in short yardage situations because he tries to pick the holes sometimes,
Although he was
Um,
pretty efficient.
no, yeah. I mean, I think
last year.
that's something that he has definitely improved severely the last few years.
Yeah.
Like that has been part of the market improvement with him these last 2 seasons. But I kind of think that Malik Davis as goal line back, or that being his role, like that's kind of just by process of elimination, right? They don't really have anybody else to kind of do that. So
he's not Zach Crockett or Mike Allstott reincarnated, right?
No. So when it's early August, they sign a 230-pound back, or Lipke is clearly making the team and is going to be on the game day roster. I imagine someone like that will probably take over those roles.
I will say, I still think Malik Davis, to me, is the favorite to be the RB2 on this team, right? And whatever that role ends up being, whether he is the goal line back or just the guy that gets 8 carries a game just to kind of spell Tony Pollard. I kind of agree with Mike McCarthy, though. Like, he popped on tape. I remember the Green Bay game, like late in that game, he was running hard. And I was kind of shocked that the Cowboys didn't give him more touches because he was running so well. I think that's one where I at least would like to see, okay, what happens if we give him more touches? Like, does he just continue to look good every time we give him more opportunities? Because I am certainly interested here.
Yeah, he's certainly earned the opportunities. I think that's the thing you see on tape is that excuse me. He definitely, on his play on the field, during games, but also during practices and training camp, he showed you something all different. I mean, he earned that opportunity to play, and so I think you get him on the field in the regular season, and then I think he earned more touches. So that's why they're kind of viewing this as a job that he's got to lose. He's earned that right to kind of, be the first man up to kind of take those snaps from Zeke, and we'll see what happens.
And again, I think the Cowboys would love for him to earn that job, right? Instead of Ronald Jones, who is an option as well. We haven't talked about him a ton, but if he can take that job and you have that guy under contract, well, I don't know, undrafted rookie free agent deal for the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
That's a big savings that you can get at running back. So again, look for Malik Davis to get a ton of opportunities throughout the summer and OTAs as we get to training camp and then into the regular season. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every day. Again, every day or tomorrow on the show, We're going to be answering your Twitter questions, so make sure you send them in to us. We've got Vach Lombardi coming up on the show on Thursday to talk about the Cowboys offensive line, so tune in for that. You can follow the show on YouTube, Locked On Cowboys. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. We'll see you guys next time.